Hey everyone, this is Sam Warren with the Houston Chronicle, and I'm back with another Texans film review. Today we're going to be talking about Houston's worst offensive performance of the year and its 27-19 loss to the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football. Nothing really went right for the Texans as they had a season low 254 yards. CJ Stroud had his worst QBR since the Packers lost last year, and nothing could get going on the ground at all. But what was really troubling was the mistakes, the poor play calling, and the execution in the critical moments. The Texans were just 3 for 19 combined on third and fourth down against the Seahawks, and they only scored a touchdown on their final red zone trip. That performance after 15 days off with the bye week really just doesn't bode well for the rest of this Texans season. So let's take a look at what went wrong against the Seahawks. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about the Texans' first red zone drive of the night, and the mistakes that kind of just take away a touchdown scoring opportunity for this team. They finally got into the red zone late in the second quarter against the Seahawks via a Dalton Schultz 22-yard catch and a Nico Collins pass interference call. But some mistakes by a couple of the Texans just end up taking away a real touchdown chance for the team. So what we're going to see here is a couple of different mistakes on this play on the first down, on the 1st and 10. And what we're going to see here to start is Jaden Higgins goes out in motion. And then he's going to be the key first guy that really kind of makes a mistake here. As we see, it's kind of a longer developing route for Dalton Schultz up here, Nico Collins up here. But Jaden Higgins, as you can see, he's kind of just all messed up, jacked up with this route, and he ends up being Nico or CJ Stroud's first read. So as CJ goes through kind of his progression, with this uncertainty here with Jaden Higgins, that first progression is taken away. Then with the pressure coming in, we don't. CJ gets a little bit uncomfortable. Doesn't see Jalen Noel right here, so maybe CJ could get the ball out of his hands for Jalen here. But this pressure is coming in here because Tay Ersry just kind of gets beat on this move back here. But what the second mistake that kind of happens is as we see Nick Chubb goes to chip and help with Titus Howard here on DeMarcus Lawrence. He kind of just falls over and takes away this check down opportunity. So CJ has to go and evade this rusher here. He steps up in the pocket. He doesn't see Noel. Then he's going to try and scramble, but as he sees the guy's conversion down on him, he's going to try and get the ball out to Nick Chubb, and the ball is just kind of off kilter. Not a really good throw. Not a really good play by Nick Chubb. Just a lot of mistakes on this play, kind of overall, not what you want to see from a 1st and 10 in the red zone. So now we go to the next play. Texans are going to go to try and run the ball now. After that pass play just really doesn't work on first down. A couple of different things happen. They're gonna try and get some yardage here with Nick Chubb, but things just end up going awry. More mistakes happen before the Texans can even get the run off here. So what we're going to see is a mistake by CJ Stroud, and also a mistake, not really actually a mistake, just poor execution by Jake Andrews here at the center. So what we're going to see is Stroud snap the ball after this motion comes in, and watch his drop foot right here. So CJ, he's going to try and hand the ball off here to Nick Chubb, but CJ never really ends up moving this drop foot. He just kind of has lazy footwork here, which wouldn't be the biggest issue against kind of other defensive lines, but you have Jaron Reed here manned up over Jake Andrews, kind of a immediate threat here. And that's just going to come back to bite CJ with this lazy footwork. So when we see him not move that foot, Jaron Reed is going to blow back Jake Andrews here in this zone blocking scheme. And what happens with that is when an offensive lineman gets blown back, their feet are dropped back, and that foot just kind of ends up landing right on CJ Stroud's foot as he's trying to get back and make this handoff here. And what ends up happening, CJ falls. It's an easy sack for the Seahawks, and just more mistakes happening to compound and take away this scoring opportunity. So now we're here on 3rd and 15. Not an ideal situation for any team trying to score in the red zone. But the Texans are going to give it a go here, dial up a long passing play, but just the Texans aren't able to execute because the receivers really aren't able to separate here. So the matchup that you probably want here is you have Josh Jobe, a backup corner because Devin Witherspoon isn't playing. He was hurt. On Nico Collins, your number one option in what looks like to be man coverage. But what we're going to see here is Nico just takes this inside release and sets himself up kind of for failure to get outside on his corner route. Um, so he's covered, and he's kind of bracketed here. So that's not the throw for Stroud, even though that's going to be his first read. Um, and then Jalen Knoll, maybe you have a little bit of separation here, but that's not the throw that CJ is going to end up trying to make. Um, just it doesn't really have that whole much of separation there either. Then Jaden Higgins is trying to find a window, but kind of here in no man's land as well. And also Stroud has to deal with this pressure here from this speed move on Tay Ursary. Just doesn't really have a whole ton of time, especially with DeMarcus Lawrence coming in here too. So what the Texans end up doing, dumps it off to Dalton Schultz. They get 8 yards and they end up kicking a field goal. So um, really, the Texans' first red zone drive just doesn't go well because of these mistakes that happen. There's a miscommunication on a route with Jaden Higgins, doesn't run the right route. Nick Chubb doesn't really get out on that check down because he falls over and pass cover or in pass blocking. CJ Stroud's lazy with his footwork, which leads to Jake Andrews kind of getting blown back and knocking him over for an easy sack, and that just puts the offense in a bad situation. So that's stuff that you don't want to be seeing after 15 days off, and that should not be stuff that you put out on tape when you have that much time to prepare and that much time to clean up your offense with all that time off. So now we're going to jump into some issues that I really saw with some play calling from Nick Caley in some critical situations. So what we're going to see here, this is 3rd and 1. The Texans in the third quarter, they're still in a one-score game here, mostly because of that Will Anderson strip sack that he had, and the defense just keeping them in the game. The offense really hasn't done much at this point. They haven't scored a touchdown. They really haven't made a threat at scoring a touchdown, to be honest. But they're still hanging around in this game in a one-score game. But they kind of start feeling the heat here, and they're going to make some questionable decisions on this 3rd down and the ensuing 4th down. So what we're going to see here is the Texans 3rd and 1. They think they can get the run game going. They really couldn't the entire night because the offensive line just really couldn't handle the Seahawks' pretty dominant front, both in the run game and in the pass game. But what we're going to see is that the Texans are going to try and employ their duo concept that they really had a lot of success against the Ravens. Nick Chubb scored his big touchdown run on a duo concept. And they had some success kind of running that gap scheme stuff with Nick Chubb. Here they've got Woody Marks in the backfield, but this duo play is just kind of doomed from the start because of the Texans' offensive line just straight up getting beat. So what we're going to see here, Texans are going to employ some motion. Not really like it really does much, but Xavier Hutchinson had a pretty good blocking game against the Ravens. He's been a good addition in the run game for the Texans so far this season. But they're going to kind of get tight here and use him in this duo scheme. But the real issue here is watch Tay Ursary. He just gets swum by DeMarcus Lawrence here. Throws him kind of out of the play, just doesn't have an opportunity to block anybody meaningful outside of this safety here. But that just kind of dooms the play from the start a little bit. And then once you go inside, it really doesn't get any better. You've got Laken Tomlinson here, who had been rotating with Drew Scruggs kind of the entire game. D'Amico Ryan said on Tuesday that they feel that the left guard position kind of plays better when Drew Scruggs and Laken Tomlinson rotate. Juice had played pretty much the entire Ravens game, and it looked like he took over the starting job, but they employed both of them against the Seahawks, and really neither of them really played well or made a difference, to be honest. And Laken really just doesn't make a difference on this play. So what we see here is he gets, not a really great push on Byron Murphy, starts getting blown back, and that just puts him in the gap here. And what that also does with Tay Ursary, missing his guy, Laken Tomlinson getting blown back, that just allows Ernest Jones here, the linebacker, to get right up in that gap and end up making the tackle here. So that's, you see all three guys in the play here. You see Lawrence, you see Byron Murphy, you see Ernest Jones. That's just poor blocking by the Texans offensive line and just something that they need to clean up. So that 3rd down just doesn't work because of execution problems. But what's the really troubling thing about this sequence is what the Texans end up doing next. So they're going to end up wanting to go for it on 4th and 1 from their own 41 down a score, which it's an aggressive play, but it's also the right play in the situation analytically. So you got to credit the Texans for doing that. But what they end up calling is really confusing and some troublesome for me with Nick Caley's offense. So they're going to keep the ball on the ground here on 4th and 1, which is maybe a good call. And there's a couple of different things that they could do with that. So what you see here from this Seahawks line, it kind of looks like that they're preparing for CJ Stroud to run a QB sneak, and the Texans have had some success doing that, particularly in the Titans game in Week 4. They had some success with CJ Stroud getting some first downs on some QB sneaks. And they could. It looks like they could probably do that. Get minimal yards here. All you need is 1 yard, half a yard. Get CJ over the line. That's a viable option. Then the other situation here is you look like Texans are kind of setting up a similar formation to what we saw on the previous play, but just flipped to the right side. So as you see here, you've got Braxton Berrios inserted in between the tackle and the tight end. If we just go back and we look at the other play, that's pretty much what it looks like here on the other side of the ball with Xavier Hutchinson inside this tight end, maybe feigning that duo look. And maybe it looks like that they can run it to the right side on this time. That also wouldn't be that bad of a decision because you've got Titus Howard here, probably your best blocker, both in pass blocking and run blocking so far this season. So running behind him in a crucial play like 4th and 1, not a questionable decision. But what the Texans end up doing is they're going to basically use this formation to make it look like they're doing that, but then end up going back and running behind Ursery and Laken Tomlinson. And the type of run that they're running also is pretty questionable decision-wise. Not only are they running behind, deciding to run behind two offensive linemen that got zero push on the previous play, it's shown that they've struggled in these matchups just one play before. So on an even more critical play, you're going back to them and trusting them that they can get some yardage and prove successful for the Texans. But then they're also going to a different run scheme, zone scheme, where they're kind of designed to move guys out of the way to create open rush lanes, which is a little bit more difficult for a Texans offensive line when they ran gap scheme the last play. And they were designated to try and open up a single gap with multiple guys, and they weren't able to do that. So when there's one guy that's aligned on one dude and trying to just open up gaps through zone blocking schemes, to rely on them, which is more difficult for an offensive lineman to do that, it really doesn't make a whole ton of sense in the scenario, and it just doesn't end up working out. So what we see here, exactly, they're running zone left. And then we're going to see similar matchups here. Laken Tomlinson just doesn't get any push on DeMarcus Lawrence to start. Tate Ursery really doesn't get any push on Uchenna Nwosu over here. They're just reading the backfield. They're waiting to break. DeMarcus Lawrence breaks away from Laken Tomlinson pretty quickly. Nwosu gets in there too. And they stop him for a negative 2 yard gain. So just really questionable decision making from Nick Caley to decide to go back to running behind those two guys when they previously, you just saw that they didn't have success in the running game. So I think that's just questionable decision making on Nick Caley trying to get a little bit too cute with it, with making, trying to deceive the Seahawks defense that really saw through kind of his whole game plan throughout the entire evening. So when you're really struggling kind of game plan wise, kind of lean on your strengths, and definitely running behind Tate Ursery and Laken Tomlinson against those guys was not your strength last night. So that gave the Seahawks really good field position. They take it down 5 plays, go up and score a rushing touchdown. And that ends up being the pivotal and ultimately deciding score in the game. So really questionable stuff. Play calling wise on those critical moments, that 3rd and 4th down. And it's just, it's another mistake, not only on the players, but on the staff and decisions that they were making as well. So now we're going to jump to the Texans' second red zone drive of the night, which was kind of a combination of that poor execution and poor play calling that we saw on those previous 2 examples. So what we're going to see here, Texans have a 1st and goal situation after a big throw to Jalen Noel. And the Texans are just really going to not end up getting any push on their run play to Woody Marks, as we saw on the previous plays before. The Texans just really couldn't run the ball at all at night, get any push on this Seattle defensive front. They're going to try and run this gap scheme that closes pretty quickly as they're not able to hit these double blocks here. So Woody's going to try and bounce it, get into this gap over here. Guy just bounces off of Lake and Tomlinson, and Woody gets to the goal line, but just can't get over. So they're just kind of second and inches coming up right after this. So now we get to second and goal. Texans have just a few inches to gain after that Woody Marks run. But after not seeing that those holes open up, after the Texans aren't really to get any run push the entire night, the Texans are going to try and do something else. But what they end up doing is pretty predictable for the Seahawks defense. So they're going to try and end up going play action here on the line, try and get some guys out in the flat to give CJ Stroud an easy rollout touchdown. But Seahawks pick that up pretty quickly, pretty easily. And Mike McDonald's defense is kind of just all locked in on what Nick Haley's trying to do here. So what we're going to see, CJ Stroud fakes this handoff to Woody Marks. Seahawks defense not biting on that run fake pretty much at all, except for these guys down here. And Jaden Higgins here backside, not the throw. He's probably the only guy that gets legitimately somewhat open on this. Dalton Schultz is covered in the flat. Jalen Noel is going to try and hit this little fake block and dump out, but he just doesn't really end up doing anything. And Xavier Hutchinson is smothered back here in the back of the end zone. So as CJ Stroud has DeMarcus Lawrence screaming down on him, all he can do is throw the ball away. And the Seahawks defense was locked in on this play from the start. So that first down run play doesn't work. That second down play action play just really gets snipped out easily by the Seahawks defense. So this Texans offense is really grasping at straws to try and make something happen to get them over the goal line. And what they end up doing is they try and end up going back to another play action play, which isn't completely snipped out by the Seahawks defense like on that previous play. They're able to get a receiver open here in Xavier Hutchinson to get have an open option for CJ Stroud in the end zone. But the Texans aren't able to execute this play well enough to give CJ Stroud a clean throw to get to Hutchinson to score their first touchdown of the night. So what we're going to see here, we're going to see another play action rollout play with CJ Stroud faking this handoff to Woody Marks. And watch Hutchinson here. He does a good job of kind of pressing vertical before breaking out. Kind of coverage package just works out well where Riq Woolen is the guy on him. He's deep. Xavier Hutchinson is going to have that separation here to get outside and would be score a touchdown. But where this play goes wrong is here with Dalton Schultz and his route and his execution of this play. So what we're going to see is Schultz tries to get out to his flat route, but he just gets blown up here by Drake Thomas, kind of taken over with Woody Marks here. He gets thrown off his route by the linebacker, and what that ends up doing is he gets blown back here, doesn't really continue his route. He kind of just doesn't go out to the mesh point. He just kind of sticks here after getting blown up and tries to give CJ Stroud maybe something. But what that ends up doing is when Ty Okeda, the free safety who's responsible for Schultz, when he doesn't go out there, he sees that Thomas basically takes responsibility of him, takes him out of the play. That gives Okeda free kind of reign to get out into the flat here where he thinks Schultz probably would have ended up going. So now he sees Schultz out of the play. He sees CJ Stroud kind of prepping to throw to Xavier Hutchinson, who has great separation here. This should be a touchdown. Okeda just makes a nice play, though, with having no real responsibility on Schultz here anymore, to get up, tip this ball, make sure that Xavier Hutchinson doesn't catch it, and there's no touchdown here. So by Dalton Schultz, not continuing his route, not understanding that Drake Thomas was going to come in, kind of blow his spot up, that just takes away a touchdown from Xavier Hutchinson and takes points off the board for the Texans offense. So the Texans are in real trouble now, 4th and goal, 4th and inches after being kind of stonewalled on those 2 play action plays for multiple reasons. First on Dalton Schultz unable to execute with Drake Thomas blowing him up. and then not running his route afterwards to let Ty Okada make that pass breakup on Xavier Hutchinson's route. But also with Nick Caley kind of being tied to that play action game when the Texans really had no threat of running the ball the entire night. And you saw that the Seahawks were not really threatened by the play action stuff at all, especially on that second down play when they blanketed everything and CJ Stroud had nowhere to throw the ball. So Texans are on their last resort here, and their last resort is their jumbo package to try and get something over the line. But they aren't really able to execute that at either because of who they end up bringing in. And they bring in Blake Fisher here on the jumbo package. He's an offensive tackle, but he reports as eligible, and he's extra beef up front as a tight end. But he's going to make the mistake here as the Texans are getting ready to go, as we see. And if you didn't catch that, you're just going to see a slight little movement from Fisher here as he raises his butt up. That's a false start, and the Texans are going to lose that penalty and lose 5 yards. Honestly, it didn't really even matter. Probably benefited the Texans in the end because this play just ends up getting blown up because the Texans offensive line just doesn't end up blocking for it. And British Bush doesn't pick up this defensive lineman here. So wouldn't have gotten the touchdown anyway. The penalty almost saves them. Their own failure to execute really kind of saves them and gives them an extra play here. But yeah, Texans can't execute the jumbo package because the guy that they brought in just ends up false starting and losing them some yards. So now the Texans are down to kind of their last resort here, 4th and 5 after that false start, and they really have no choice but to throw the ball here. So I can't run it out of that jumbo package because of the way that they've been running it that night. So they're gonna try and throw the ball here on 4th and 5, and they're gonna target their rookie receiver in Higgins, who we saw make a little bit of a mistake on that first play that we went through, and we're gonna see him probably, in my opinion, make another little bit of a mistake here. So as we're watching this play develop, they send him in motion, and what this tells us is they're going to end up passing Higgins off in man coverage to Kobe Bryant up here, the free safety, with the other guys manned up down here as well. And this is going to be a corner route from Higgins. You see a little bit, probably an offsides penalty on DeMarcus Lawrence here, but Texans are able to handle that pretty well with Titus Howard. Tay Ursary that's blown up a little bit here by Nwasu, but protection for the way it had been playing that night probably holds up pretty well. Stroud also has time to throw, but more focus is on the Higgins route right here. What we're going to see is right as he gets to this point, he's running this corner route. There's too much space here where Higgins tries to make his break. He's breaking out with Kobe Bryant in off outside leverage, just not what you want to be running a corner route against. So what Higgins needs to do is, as he gets to his break, he needs to press up onto this DB a little bit more, maybe give him a little bit more wiggle, press vertical more to get him out of this, leverage and the ability to kind of just pounce on him and force him down. So what we see here now is Higgins with the guy over top of him, really no choice but to try and express this towards the sideline. And that's not just where CJ Stroud wants him to be. Once he gets here, Stroud throws Higgins more towards, not towards the pylon, but kind of the back of this end zone right here. And as we see it with this throw, if Higgins gets to this point where he's breaking, he's a little bit more pressed up, gives this guy a little bit more press vertical, and gets him off this leverage a little bit more here to be able to press out there. This is going to be a touchdown for Higgins, and it's a really solid throw by CJ Stroud in my opinion. So that's just another, a little bit of a route mistake by the rookie in a crucial situation where the Texans just aren't able to execute. And just more struggles for the Texans offense. So as we saw with all those plays, the Texans' difficulties in those crucial situations were kind of due to a matter of a bunch of different things. The Texans were unable to execute on certain plays where they just had poor technique, especially in the run blocking. Texans were just kind of getting blown up the entire night, and they couldn't move the Seahawks defensive line at all. So it's just poor execution just kind of getting manhandled, getting beaten out there. Texans also had kind of unforced errors by themselves with that Higgins missed route. Nick Chubb kind of getting blown off in that check down, that false start penalty there. So, and also CJ Stroud kind of being lazy with his footwork and getting stepped on as he's trying to drop back and give off that handoff. So a lot of, unforced stuff that the Texans just kind of succumb to on those crucial situations that you just don't want to see. And then also some struggles with Nick Caley's play calling, with him, having some struggles with creativity, kind of leaning on things that the Seahawks were keying on and knew were kind of coming. And all those things are really troublesome coming out of that 15-day preparation period that the Texans had. They had some really strong offensive performances going into the bye week. Obviously, those weren't against good competition, but those were some things that you could build on. The Texans seemed like they were excited that they had built on some stuff through the bye week, and then they come out and they have this kind of dud of a game where they aren't able to move the ball. The offense just doesn't look creative. They're having these silly mistakes. It's really disheartening for a Texans offense that seemed like it was making strides, and it just really doesn't bode well for this Texans team moving forward. So they've got to right the ship. Nick Caley's got to figure out how to call a game a little bit better. They've got to get these silly mistakes kind of out of their system, and honestly, they've got to just execute better. As much as D'Amico Ryan says it, like that's the blocking wasn't good, the rushing wasn't good, a bunch of different stuff wasn't good. So disheartening stuff for the Texans in Seattle. But thank you so much for watching. I know it's a little bit of a more simple breakdown this week, but hard to overlook the mistakes that these guys made against the Seahawks. So thanks so much for watching. Like doing these. So as always, leave me feedback and let me know what else you guys want to see kind of moving forward. So thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.